Well, all right, here we are. It's time for another week of some Pulumi live streaming for the show that we're still working on a name for, but maybe it's called Pulumipus Portions. Maybe it's called Pulumipus TV. Maybe it's called Infrastructure as Video. I think today I called it Pulumipus TV, but we're still working on that. So let me know what you think as that goes. And we've got nobody's really joined yet. So I think I'm going to take a minute to do a little twittering um, to let people know what's going on there. Let's turn that off there. And I did send in that. And let's see. Let's tweet from the brand account. So um, uh, here we go. Okay, let's go ahead and use the power of having the ability to tweet from the brand account where that goes. So we just sent in a good little fun there. All right, so let's get ourselves happening. Hey, someone's here. What up? There we go. Hey, okay, we can start doing some stuff. So here's what's going on. We just launched this week all new content at pulumi.com/learn. And what I wanted to do today is kind of go through that first topic, which is Pulumi fundamentals. So again, if you're a Pulumi expert, this might be review for you, but also this will be just kind of some fun times to go through that and see what we think of it. This is also me going through the content for maybe the first time since it launched. I was supposed to review it for my colleague Laura, and I didn't review the most recent. But if you do go to, wow, that's really hard to read. I'll put the link in the chat. Be a little bit easier to see what's going on there. But yeah, this is where we'll be working from. So what we did with this new Pulumi content, so we already have some tutorials, we already have lots of stuff, but Learn is just more of the beginnings of our Learn path as you go through. So the first one, and we'll be if you were to go to pulumi.com/learn, you'll see we have the Pulumi fundamentals, which is what we're going to do today. But then the next one, which is what I'm going to do next week, the same time next week, I'm going to go through building with Pulumi, where we talk about more complex configurations, multiple environments, and a bunch of other fun stuff. Not that today isn't fun, but what we're going to do with what we're doing in Pulumi fundamentals is let's see, what does it say here? Learn how to use Pulumi to build, configure, and deploy a real-life modern application. We're going to be using the PulumiPus Boba Tea Shop app. And this is going to be it has a front end, it has a back end, and a database. And the couple things that this is all very Docker focused. But if you want to kind of come along for the ride, I put the link in the chat. And couple things. So if you wanted to do this tutorial, this is what we kind of assume, right? So we assume you need a Pulumi account and a token, and you need to have Docker. We're going to be using Docker for this, and this is written in Python. But remember, you can kind of do this Pulumi stuff in whichever of our languages you like. This one just happens to be Python. So this is using the PulumiPus Boba Tea Shop. And it's a progressive web app, so PWA built on the MERN stack, so which is Mongo, Express, React, and Node. This is kind of how some people write some apps, so it seems reasonable. And it has a front end client, it has a back end REST server, and then a MongoDB instance that stores our product data. That's what we're doing with this app. And this is, as you kind of go through this path, what we're going to do, it says we're using Pulumi to create our infrastructure, configure that infrastructure, and push that infrastructure to production. Okay. And again, we're using Docker here. Part of the reason we do that in this case is that it's, you don't have to have cloud credentials and stuff to be able to build with this, to kind of go through this. And this is, so what you will be able to do after we're done here, be able to, how to create projects and configure and provision our infrastructure. So, it all boils down to everything we do in Pulumi is organized. Our infrastructure is all organized as a project. And this project is a Pulumi program, we write in a programming language, that if you run, it declares what is this desired state we want our infrastructure to be, and then we want Pulumi to manage. And then we have these things called stacks, which are in isolated, independently configurable instances of that program. Stacks are a thing. If you want to know more about them, tune in next week because that's when we're going to dig into that. And so we're going to go ahead and let's see, enough of just my face. Let's bring up my code window here. And the first thing is, again, as we said, like every Pulumi program lives in its own directory. So we should have one of those. So we'll call this one mkdir, my first app for, we'll just call it my, let's do this, boba tea shop, because I might have a conflict. Cool. Swing into there. There, look, we created a Pulumi program project. It's that easy. But Pulumi program is this directory with a bunch of files in it. So the platypus is blocking the view of me. That's the platypus is the Plumipus is definitely better looking than I am. But I think, how do I have that set up? If we did want to, this is me. This is also like fun restream live. Whatever, we do it like this. See, then now you see way too much of me. Nobody wants that one. Maybe this is the view that we want. I feel like this is a little bit easier to see the code. Maybe we'll just turn off. There we go. There, see, overlay on, overlay off. This is a streaming show now. Okay, cool. You're going to bring back the Plumipus. All right. Anyway, we want to go ahead and, again, all this is this directory with a bunch of files in it. However, you know what? The more I think about it, the more I think this is actually the better view. There we go. Okay. It's not gonna block as much stuff that way. Anyway, fun thing. So we can use the Pulumi new command, which is going to pre-populate it with all the scaffolding we need. So we're going to go ahead and say, there we go, even better. So what we did here is when we said Pulumi new Python, so it's going ahead and scaffolding out all the stuff that we need inside this My Boba Tea Shop app to write a Pulumi program in Python. Okay, awesome, right? Fun stuff. Also, let me tell you how much I love Python. That was being a little sarcastic. Python's probably the language I know the least, but that's what Laura wrote this tutorial in. So that's why we're going to do it. So it'll be fun. My teammates are both much more Python-y than me. But it's okay because I could just go and do this whole thing in TypeScript or Go. But part of this is that I want to go through this content. And guess who's going to be going and rewrite and adding in the other languages later? Probably me. What is this? Okay. And okay. It's also entirely possible that my entire Python setup on my laptop here is completely jacked, but we will find out. Does Pulumi do anything with Dockers? We are absolutely going to be doing Docker stuff. That's, in fact, exactly what this lab is going to be. We are going to be creating some Docker images in just a second, as soon as I get this stuff installed. Why is this doing that? It's funny because I've been doing a bunch of Python workshops and presenting them, but I've been doing it all in Gitpod. So I don't even know what state Python is on my machine right now, but it should be able to. I don't know why it's taking so long to build gRPCIO or gRPCIO. The way you specify the okay, come on, Python. By the way, this is definitely much more of a situation of I don't use my laptop for Python. And I also think that I did have a weird thing before. Let me look at my, oops. That's not what I meant to do. There at one point was something I was doing because of this gRPCIO situation that I thought they fixed. Um, let's see. We're gonna. I had something. Let's source my ZHS ZH. Okay, let's go ahead and um, okay, so this is empty now. Yep, and then let's go ahead and run that again. Oh, this happened to me before. Okay, this is yes. We will be talking a little bit about where the SaaS comes in. I'm not really demoing like the deep features, but we are using the SaaS as our state backend. Um, okay, let's see if it's able to build gRPCIO better this time. This looks a lot more promising. Oh no, this was where it got stuck last time. For the record, if you're curious, the reason that I had the weird problem that I had before, or at least what I was trying to undo, is gRPCIO had some weirdness on Apple Silicon, which is what I'm running. And there were a couple environment variables you had to set in order for it to build proper. Um, okay, while we're talking about it, what are the deep features in the SaaS? So if you really want to, if we kind of want to think about that for a second, what the SaaS is doing is in with Pulumi, we have to have a place to store the state, right? So you can store the state in a bunch of different places. You could put an S3 bucket, put it in blob storage, put local file store, whatever. Or you can use a Pulumi SaaS. So just for storing state, that is our, if that's at the app.pulumi.com, and that's free for you, no big deal. The difference is where it kind of comes in to some of the features that might come in is it has to do with your sorry, I'm still just frustrated by gRPCIO. If you are, excuse me, so what you're going to get is you have it's blah, blah, blah. Built into the SaaS that's free for individuals, right? Is you have state and secret management, and all your integrations. If you want to use our team features, which are free to start, but then it just depends on um, how much you're using. This lets you have up to 25 members on your team, and it gives you lets you run concurrent updates, and you can throw some webhooks in there. And then if you the more advanced features include your role-based access control, and also even potentially self-hosting if those things have to go into play. But if you're going to talk about um, being able to create gated deployments also, right? So if you want to use our crossguard feature for the policy as code, that's in the enterprise. If you want to be able to have organization wide policies or have a server side piece, and then um, using SAML or SSO is on the enterprise stuff. So that's all. If you actually go to plumi.com/pricing, all that stuff is listed there. I am really trying to figure out why this is not wanting to build. This is getting this is not a great experience for you who are having to watch me troubleshoot my Python issues right now. Um, I'm gonna maybe phone a friend in just a second and see if I'm gonna see if I can get Laura to join because she might be able to help us walk through stuff. I definitely apologize, but this is part of the fun of live streaming. Why is this so fussy in building this particular part? All right, so the problem is this has really got me just stuck right at the beginning, and again, back to my usual thing of that I don't really know Python, so I don't know. Oh, there we go. That just took a right. Did it or no? That just nope. That was just me clicking. Sorry, false alarm. Laura is going to be joining us, so worst case is maybe we could twist her arm into having her share her screen while I talk. But welcome to Python troubleshooting, because this is actually Python troubleshooting. I still assume this is something to do with this Apple Silicon, because why would um, mm, all right, sorry for the dead air here. I'm just trying to look to see if there's anything. Oh, there it goes. Wow, that just took quite some time, just in time for Laura to join. But hey, Laura, do you want to come hang out with us anyway?
Sure. Hi.
There we go.
What's going on?
We didn't have them on. So, if you want to hang out, Laura, that's awesome. What happened, just because you just joined, is it took about a million years to build gRPCIO to the point that I thought there was something wrong, and was
Okay.
troubleshooted. And of course, the second that you joined the stream, it started to work.
See,
Um,
I'm magic. That's
you
how it
are,
works.
you are. Okay. So yeah, we are going through yes, Laura. So Laura, this is also everybody give some good claps to Laura for launching Learn
Hi.
Pulumi this week, which is what we're
Thanks.
actually going through. So yeah. Cool. All right. So we were just here we go. We're continuing along. All right, cool. So if we go take a look at what just got created, basically this main.py is our Pulumi program. Oh my god. Are you kidding me? Visual Studio Code needs to be updated to where what
Panic.
can I just be done with
Panic.
computers for the day? Can we just start it all over again?
Hey,
Let's all
I
just talk
recorded
about Battlestar
2 hours
Galactica.
I recorded 2 hours of video yesterday with my microphone disconnected. It was
Well,
great.
it was a good rehearsal.
It was
Um
perfect. Thank you.
oh, thanks. So all right. So now that we're in, we're going to actually start writing something in our Pulumi program here. And we're going to create some Docker images. Is sure what it looks like is what we're going to do. So we're going to create a Pulumi resource. And the resources are all of our building blocks of all of our infrastructure that happens. Well, we just lost a ton of viewers, but that's okay because I wouldn't have been watching either for the last 15 minutes of me. But it's okay. People will come back. We're good. It's good.
Okay. As long as
You
they're
can
not running
rewatch.
away because I'm on here.
No, no, no.
Okay.
Okay. So the first thing that we are going to do is our resources that we're going to build. And someone had asked, Felix had asked us that we're going to be doing Docker, and we actually are. So the resources we're going to be doing are Docker containers and images. The resource provider we're using is Docker, and Python is our language. And again, we're using Docker because it makes it a lot easier to set this stuff up. Where these pieces come in. So that's, but you would probably likely be using one of the major cloud providers or Kubernetes or something like that. So inside our directory here, we are going to create the we're going to create an app directory. Okay, we're going to go into there, and inside of here, we are going to pull down the code that the Boba Tea Shop app does. So we're going to clone that into there. And then we are going to bop it up a level. So we're just going to move that directory up there. So now if we look, we can see we have our backend and data and all of our front end. So if we were to go take a look at the backend Docker file, we can kind of see what it's going to do, right? So this is taking the REST backend into the Docker file system, installing our deps. And if, it's saying expose port 3000 on my host machine, which I sure as heck hope is open, or else, we're going to have a port conflict problem, but it's okay. Let's find out what happens. Cool. So now we need to use the provider. We're using Docker in here. So where am I? Yep, I'm in the right place. And we want, since we're using Python, we need to install the Pulumi Docker provider. And as I understand from my friends who know Python better than I, aka Laura, and everybody else who's ever touched Python knows Python better than I, we want to use a virtual environment or a venv. Is that how do you say venv or do you say venv? What's the right way?
I do VM for sure.
Venv? Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, it's virtual env for me. So
Okay.
virtual
Oh,
env
you
because
always say virtual env.
I use other tools versus
Yeah.
VM, which is like VM's the built-in, but
I just
pipenv is
wanted to
my
say
favorite
it the
right
way
now.
that
So,
makes me sound like I know what I'm doing.
well, don't necessarily trust that I know how to say
Okay.
things. So,
So we're going to activate it, right? So now that it's activated, that means all of these Python-y things we're doing are happening in the virtual environment, not on my crappy, uh, jacked up Python environment that is my machine, right? So so what we want to do is we want to install Docker, the Pulumi Docker provider, because we don't want it. We want to install in the virtual environment, not just on Matt's laptop, right? That's why that happened when we activated the venv, the virtual env.
so think of it as that virtual environment is like a fresh install of Python on your own tiny little machine. That's kind of how you can think about it.
It's almost like an
So,
environment that is virtual, you might say.
I know. It's amazing how that works.
Cool. Okay. So installed that package, and it also threw that into the where the hell did it go? The requirements.txt. Did it? Whoa, oh no, it's in the venvs. Wait.
Where did you click?
What just happened? Oh, add the package am I supposed to add that to the
It's a good
requirements.txt?
idea always to add it to your requirements.txt. So if you have to get interrupted in the middle and you need to reinstall your requirements, you want to
Okay.
put the package there because then all you have to do is just pip install -r requirements.txt.
And just like that, like no version or anything.
I wouldn't put
Cool.
any
Look at
version
me.
on this one. Yeah, you
I
got it.
am a Python
Did you
developer.
save it?
I just did, yes.
Okay, good.
We've had that problem before. Okay, cool. So if we go back into our main.py, what's the Pythonic way to refer to these double underscores or whatever? Or do you just sort
Dunder.
of not pronounce that? Dunder?
So I call it, so it's dunder main dunder is how I was taught how to pronounce it. So
Dunder
you'll
main
hear me
dunder.
do dunder main dunder, or dunder knit dunder. Depends on the person, but that's how my old school Python teacher taught me.
This is such a wonderful programming language. All right, cool. All right, so we
Well,
have
it stands for double underscore dunder.
No, I get it. It makes me
Okay,
think
just
like
making
Dunder
sure.
Mifflin, right? No, it's great.
Dunder dunder.
Fantastic. Cool. Okay, so we need to use our packages. So we're going to use the OS package, right? We already have Pulumi imported, and then we're going to improt. I improt things a lot. Docker as Docker. Where does the Pulumi name come from? I'm trying to
I
remember.
honestly
Laura, have you
now
heard
want
the
to know
story
if you
lately?
know, because I don't know. I haven't heard the story yet because I never got a chance to have my one-on-one with the CEO when I started. So
yeah, I'm misremembering where it comes from. It's something to do with sweeping, I think.
sweeping.
I don't know. Does it mean broom in a language? I think, but I don't think there's like a really
I gotta Google this
idiomatic
now.
idiom. Yeah. So yeah, see, maybe you can see what you can find on the back end while we're putting this in, because that's the thing that we
I
should
can
really
come
know.
up with something.
Yes. Okay.
Pull, update, manage for me.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm making it up as I go.
Okay, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna, so we say we're gonna do Pulumi git stack, and this is because we want to know what stack we're operating inside of, and we're gonna use this variable later, and then we're also going to now build our backend image. So the backend image name is very cleverly called backend instead of like, yes, it's broom in Hawaiian. That was, I knew it was something to do with broom. So if we go ahead and create this, and then we say the backend is going to be a docker.image. Oh, by the way, I should turn off Copilot because Copilot actually just turn it off for right now. Actually works fairly well with Pulumi, I've discovered, but we're not assuming that. Okay, so if I go in here and I say Docker image backend, why did it not see? This is, I just don't like any of this. I don't understand why it's not auto. I know you don't even use Visual Studio Code, so shouldn't it like know my indentation that I'm trying to do when I hit the carriage return? You know what? You don't need to watch me type. We're just going to look at what it's doing. Okay, so we're basically saying it's to use that the context is in the app backend directory. Laura, if you were talking, you're muted. You're still muted. Did you forget to turn your mic back on?
I did. Thank you.
Okay. This is why we use the stack variable, because the image name, we want it referring to the stack, whether it's dev or prod or whatnot. And we are skipping the push because we don't actually want to push this to a registry. We're just going to use it where this comes in. So that's cool. So this gives us a Docker image for the backend that's built from that Docker file. Why does this not coming in? Oh, because it's in the VN. It's not in my regular. I remember this is like a Visual Studio Code thing.
You need to change the interpreter that it's using. So I think that's down in your. I don't really know Visual Code, but yes, that one. So you want to change it to the actual virtual env that you're using. So I know where it is in PyCharm. I just can't tell you where it is in there. If you wanted to push to a private registry, that's a really great question. I believe, and let me look it up while we're talking. There is a flag or a value that you can pass in to actually do that with our Docker provider, Pulumi Docker.
Yeah, I have the extension. I remember this is sort of just I think a cheater way that we have done in the past is that I would install Pulumi Docker just in my local machine, and that way Visual Studio Code knows what to do with it. Because again, I don't know how to tell it. Like I can set language mode, but it's still.
Let's see. So there is a registry flag. And there's a credentials. So if you're wanting to push to a private registry, if you go to the Pulumi registry, which has all of the information on the Docker provider itself, there is some image registry arguments that you would be passing in that have the various information about credentials that you need to pass in, what the URL is, etc. Pieces like that. So that's where you would find that. So I don't have the specific call out. I also don't have access to the comments. So, but if you go to plumi.com/registry/packages/docker, you'll be able to get to the API docs from there. You're very welcome.
It won't let you type in the chat, Laura?
No, because I'm a guest.
Oh, but that's dumb. I guess it makes sense. I guess it makes sense because otherwise it looks like you're me. So, got it.
I can impersonate Maddie.
You could.
So many things I could do, but I'll be good.
Okay, when you're ready to deploy. Okay, I'm just trying to read what it says about how to use virtual environments in VS Code. This is more complicated than I wanted it to be. So, but this would explain why certain things aren't working. Okay, so we're also going to build our front. So we got our backend image. Cool. We do our front end image, which looks very similar, right? Except it's the other one. And then finally, we're going to do our Mongo one, which is we're doing this a little bit differently because we're not building it locally. We're doing a remote image, right? So we're saying just go pull down the actual Mongo Bionic version. We don't actually have to build that because we are not working at MongoDB. We are working at the Boba Tea Shop.
And you'll notice that we don't actually provide a registry URL. It's because it automatically assumes that you're going to Docker Hub. So that's why you're seeing this. If you were doing something different, there's, I believe, another flag you can put in to say where you're getting it from. So
Yeah,
if you were going
you
like
could do
to GitHub
the
packages
registry.
or something
Yep.
like that.
Yep. So now we are going to go ahead and run our Pulumi up, which remember the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to do a preview, right? Like, oh, what did I do wrong?
Hold on.
Here?
Slow down.
I know I was going back up to the top of the stack, I guess.
Yeah, let's see. Docker, so it's having issues with the backend. Let's see. The backend, something's up. Did you actually remember to clone down the app directory? Do you have an app directory? Okay,
it's there.
good.
There's the Docker file.
Okay, good.
Okay,
good. So it is there. That's good.
Oh, this is just not giving us a great error.
Yeah, the error is a little weird on this one.
Error, yes,
Python
exactly. Felix is right. Python is
Matt.
not compatible with Matt. This is our bigger problem. Okay. Well,
do you have Docker running?
Oh no, probably not.
Because I always turn Docker off because
the same thing. I think you're 100% right. It's probably because I don't have Docker in my. I used to, but then when I switched to this M1, I just don't have the RAM that I used to. So letting Docker just sit there hanging out, using up my memory. Okay, well that is 100% the problem. It was trying to do a Dockery thing, and of course it could not because there is no Docker running. And it's still coming up. So do we do a I'm just sort of going through the tutorial now. We kind of just sort of say like do Pulumi up, but we don't even say what it is.
What Pulumi up is actually doing.
Yeah, it just says now run Pulumi up, and then it says in the future you don't need to do this. Oh no, it did. I missed the first one. Yeah, sorry. This was me skipping around. Okay, Docker is back up. So again, what Pulumi up is going to do here, yeah, you're right. Resource failed with exit code 1. Sending, yeah, so it's still not happy about. Oh, Docker is still coming up. Jeez, Louise, Docker, you're taking your sweet time, aren't you? I thought it was up. It's probably because it wants me to update. I guarantee it's complaining because my Docker's out of date.
So one thing to know is, yes, the last two lines do pretty much say what's going on. One thing to know is that the Python errors with Pulumi are not as clear as you might see with like TypeScript, stuff like that. I think I got into a discussion with one of our folks about why that is, and I think it's about typing. I'm not exactly 100% sure why, but you may have a little bit more parsing mentally to do with a Python error than with, like, say, if you're used to TypeScript or JavaScript. So just something to know. It's not really a problem with Python in general. It's just that's how Python is. So always fun.
That looks much better.
Yay!
Yeah. Now
it does.
It just took forever for Docker to come up on my machine. So yep, and
this does look like nothing's happening. Don't panic.
I was about to.
Docker takes a little while to show things, and it doesn't actually. It's not very verbose on Pulumi or in general, really, when you're trying to build an image. So, Python's also extremely verbose API wise compared to all the other languages. Is that just a Python thing? Can you give me an example? like, I guess I don't know. Python to me is it gives a lot more context when you're doing things, but it also might give you a little too much sometimes because it's digging down into the code. I think that error stack, the error tracing and the error stack itself is very much a holdover from C. Since most Python implementations are built on top of C. If you looked at like a Java build, it's going to have a lot of the same really long error traces. But all these something args with other languages just have the value inferred. So Python has this thing about being explicit versus implicit. If you've ever read the Zen of Python, which is PEP 20, I think, it kind of tells you a little bit about the mental picture that you're getting of how to think through a Python program and how to think through how Python works as a language. So in general, it says we'd rather be explicit on what's going on versus implicit. And the reason for that is that we end up with less errors mentally when we're trying to do things quickly. So that's how I was always taught it. But if somebody else has a different take on it, that'd be great. But that's my personal
Why
view
does
on
this take
why.
so long? Like, this could be something jacked up
Yeah,
in my Docker though too, because last time I was using Docker was trying to work on this content in a different module, and so those images might be all squirrely. But
you didn't destroy
no,
Pulumi
the
destroy.
images were probably still around, just not the containers. Not there's no containers aren't running,
Well,
but
but the images
there's
are considered a resource, so it should have done a Pulumi destroy to clean it out. Now you might have some intermediate container images um, that do it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So the one thing I've noticed about the Docker resource provider with Pulumi is that for a reason that I don't 100% understand, it doesn't really show as much of what's going on, but there's a lot of layers to this image. Uh, oh yeah, you have quite a few.
Yeah. And look at all the 6 weeks ago. Remember when we were doing all the
Yeah, you have a
oh,
lot of
there it
back
goes.
end,
There it
front end.
goes. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
I've
it's
got
still building. You're
okay.
it's doing okay. It does take a little bit. I think we actually put that in there as a note at some point in the actual Learn docs. I have all the local host stuff up. Let me just check here. Yeah, it probably is just trying to keep things clean in answer to the chat, but I don't know. I like having verbose things. Obviously, I like Python, and therefore it doesn't bother me that it's so verbose. But mostly because I want to see it working. Uh, if there's a usual Docker error code 0, yeah, you won't get anything. In this case,
Yeah.
you will still get an error. It will give you the error at the end, but it doesn't show you all the layers building for the actual container. So I don't. It's something that I think maybe might get improved in the future, or maybe
Oh,
not.
there we go. Okay.
Yep.
We were screwing around enough that things happened. Okay. So also this is kind of a fun thing I've noticed is the preview really likes to talk about being verbose. This is the doc this is all from the Pulumi preview is it has to
Hmm.
show you all the stuff that Docker wanted to do. Have you
Yep.
noticed that, Laura? That's super fun, right? Like
Yeah, and
this is we
this is
normally would have
why.
this, but it throws all these warnings in because they're considered diagnostics.
Yeah,
Um,
and so the warnings are that you're doing it locally. You're
yeah,
not pulling down from somewhere else. So that's what this whole layer is. But it does give you all the details, which is kind
yep.
of nice. Only problem is now when you actually build it, it's going to do the whole thing all over again. So this is why normally I'll use a -y flag
You'll
on
YOLO it,
these,
right?
but
Yep.
the first couple times it's worth doing once. And it is a bit too much. I don't know. Like it tells you all of the stuff that goes underneath. And this is not just if you're running it on Python. This is also if you're running it on like TypeScript. If you were
Yeah,
doing this with
that's just
TypeScript
this is
instead
just
of that,
Docker
that's
at
just the
this point.
resource
Yeah.
itself. So,
Okay.
all right, go
Cool.
for it.
Okay, so we got our Dockers up there now. So we've created our images and we want to provision with the network, with the containers. So we're going to add some configuration, right? So we can configure our infrastructure, which means that we can configure all our different stacks. And our stacks are different instances, right? Excuse me. So we are going to go back into our program, and after our imports, we're going to say these are the things that are configurable. Oops. These are the things that are configurable. So we're creating the object, the config object that is a Pulumi config object, and we're saying you need to set the port the front end is using, the port the back end is using, and the port that the Mongo port is using. So if we were to run a Pulumi up now with this change that we just made, it's not going to be very happy because it's going to say, excuse me, you told me that these were required and they aren't here, so you can just get out right now. So we want to go ahead and set those. And then we can do these in a couple different ways. In this case, we're going to do it with the command. We set these Pulumi configs, which will then go ahead and create our configuration file for the stack that we're in, this pulumi.dev.yaml. These, because they're not secrets, they're not encrypted, you could have done this by hand if writing YAML by hand is a thing that you enjoy doing. So now if we were to go ahead and Pulumi up, and I'm going to do a -y like Laura recommended, just because we don't need the preview. The -y just means skip the preview. Just go ahead and YOLO that right in. Okay. Now we've set those things, but we didn't do anything with it, so that's not too interesting. So let's actually do some stuff. So we are going to go ahead and we need to create a network. And it's a Docker network, and we're going to name it again after our stack. I like to believe that all things, all the times we refer to stacks in Pulumi, we're actually doing that as a shout out to Paul Stack, who is one of our engineering leads, but I'm sure he's tired of hearing that. And now we want to, after we've created the, actually, I should have probably, we're going to put this after our images. There's no dependency from one to the other, but just sort of thinking about things. We're going to create our container for the backend. And where this is kind of interesting with the stuff we were just talking about, is that we're using this image that we've already created, and you'll also see we've set a couple of variables that we haven't done anything with yet, and those are the Mongo host, the database, and the so we're going to go ahead and set those variables again, set those config items. Those have been set. Don't we need to, Laura, we may have set them, but they aren't being read by anything. Oh, wait a minute. Never mind. That's the exact next thing I was about to do. Got it. Sorry. Okay, cool. So to my point, these are more configuration variables that we now need to have. So we're setting the Mongo host and all this. Okay. And then we have our backend container. Let's go ahead and do our front end container, but also our Mongo container. And we're pulling up all of our pieces. Everything's put together. And this ends with our, so if we were to go ahead and I see the question in the chat, just one second. If we do a Pulumi up here again. All right, working with Docker, one thing I appreciate is I can name my image using a name I can recognize. So, I mean, that sort of thing. You can name it whatever you, and you can override the so when you're setting the name of the image, we are in this particular case. Well, we are doing that right there. See how that's, I think this is sort of referring back to your point, right? We're naming it in this case according to the stack.
Yeah, so I think the question really is like how do you, so for people who can't see the comment, how do you avoid having Pulumi overwrite images so that you can go back to an older image that actually works?
Oh, overwriting.
Yeah, and so to me, that's really that tag at the end, because you can always go back in your tags. So in this case, I probably would look for like a latest tag and then have it every time update with a latest tag. Not everybody wants to stick with the latest tag, so I probably would name it, like do an increment +1 to the previous tag or something like that, to always make sure that you're getting a fresh tag on the image, and you can always call back to an older tag on your Docker image. So that's how I personally would do it. Maddie, I don't know if you have a way you would rather do that. Or is something broken and I need to take a look at the code right now?
No, it's something in the order that I did stuff. So we did the Mongo image, we do the network. Mongo container needs to happen before front end container, before all these other ones. The way that you have it. So this is something to maybe think about for the
Mongo should be the
tutorial.
first one that's created.
I know, but I don't think it.
Did I mess up the order in there somewhere? I might.
Oh no, it does. I just didn't read it.
Oh,
you do
okay.
say to put it ahead of there. Okay, so. But yeah, so the reason that was happening, if you're following along, is that the backend container refers back to Mongo container, which hadn't been created yet. So cool. Let's go ahead and run that.
Yeah. And then we do have one more question in the chat.
Yeah.
So
okay. Can I tell it somehow do your Docker stuff, but don't build if it's already there?
So generally, resources will only update in place if there's been an update to the actual resource. So for example, I was just building a whole bunch of stuff on GCP Compute. And when you have your instances are running and I have a new instance template, it only changes the instance template. It might not actually update the instances unless I tell it to. But then I also had like a subnet and a network and things like that. It didn't touch those resources because there wasn't anything changed on them. Docker, on the other hand, I'm not sure. And Maddie, you might know this better than me. I don't know. I think every time you call Pulumi up with anything that has a Docker image, the image gets rebuilt, doesn't it? Or does the image not get rebuilt unless you change it? I don't know if it's considered a change, is what I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think it definitely seems like it wants to keep changing. That's a pretty good question. Let's see what we can find. We might need to do a little digging.
But good question, because I think that the Docker provider is like a little bit strange. I think mostly because of Docker itself when it comes to things. This isn't a unique situation just to Pulumi. I think you end up with this with other infrastructure as code tooling and other tools like that, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
As we're coming up for kind of our end, last bit, we need to populate MongoDB, and we want to tell it is relying on the fact that Docker caches so much, that we want it to auto-populate on our next deploy. So the first thing we're going to do is just we want to pull that products.json file out of there and just bring it up into our main directory so we can do things with it. We're going to mount it into this sort of seed container that we're just going to use for this particular use, and we're going to Mongo import that. And this is kind of common when updating databases intermittently, but you would typically wire that up to an API and update it this way. This is just how we're getting from point A to point B in this tutorial. But you can do this with Plumi just like you would with Docker. So after the backend container, but before the front end container, we're going to add this data seed container, which looks a little bit like this. Let me make this so you can see it a little bit better. And we're seeing we're sort of we're bringing up the Mongo, and we're mounting that, and then we're running this Mongo import against that JSON file. It's going to get our stuff into our Mongo. So let's go ahead and Pulumi. Let's go ahead and save the file, Maddie, and now let's Pulumi up, which it's gonna, have some things it wants to do.
Yeah. So there's a question about we use Docker in the API. So does that mean we currently have no intention to support containers and only support Docker? I don't know if you want to talk first about the code itself.
All I was just going to say is in this case, we are specifically using that resource and that provider. There are other providers. This tutorial only supports Docker. It doesn't mean Pulumi only supports Docker. Is sort of the short part of that. But go ahead and.
Well, I was wondering if you were also talking about like, would we support Podman or I always know it as RKT or Rict, but I don't know what it is now. This is a good question.
This is me not being cleaned up on my Docker from before. So, or is it? No, this is that Mongo dev. This happened before, I think. Oh, no, it's just this old. Hang on. That's the reason that happened was again from other stuff I was doing. Yeah. Okay, we'll try this again. Okay, there we go. Yep. Didn't have that old container hanging around. Okay, did everything go? Again, all this extra junk in there. The problem with all these warnings coming in is that see, I actually had errors and I didn't see them because it blew this over. Why does it not see? I had this problem before, Laura, where
do a Pulumi refresh, which refreshes your state, your state of what your system is. Because if you're what'll happen is that if you if one of the containers failed to update, it will then knock over one of the other containers because they're wired together. So, because this workflow involves creating containers, what options do I have as a dev or DevOps to control the deployment of my application? Is it completely reliant on the environment it's deploying to? Hold on, I got to read that one again.
Yeah.
Read that question again there. Pulumi does work with Kubernetes. It does work with service meshes, things like that. As a dev, because this workflow involves creating containers and manipulating containers, what options do I have as a dev or a DevOps to control the deployment of my application?
Yeah, I want to take a step back and just sort of be a reminder of we're using a very Docker heavy part because this is just sort of introducing some of the concepts in writing the Pulumi code. This is probably not what your Pulumi program would look like because does it have mechanisms if I deploy to random resources? Okay, Canary, Blue Green, etc. So where go ahead.
I just did a video on this that released yesterday about Blue Green deployments and things like that. So did it run? Did you want to switch over?
No, I'm going to find that video.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Because
short version is yes, you can do canaries and blue greens with Pulumi. Long version is it takes a little bit of work to get your code right to be able to do that, but you can actually split traffic and do all of the various things you would do. You do have to think a little bit about how do I network. So like what does my network need to look like and how do I load balance a little bit? So you have to have a little bit of that understanding to be able to do a canary and a blue green, depending on what you're trying to do, but it does actually work. And in terms of I'm just trying to think of any specific features. That's a good question.
There's your the video that Laura is just talking about. So it's probably a good place to start. So I am totally falling over because of it still can't
failed.
It's still having problem deleting that container because it thinks the container isn't there that it wants. I had this problem before. So I tried the Pulumi refresh. Although let's just make sure that I didn't, again, back to like, okay, yes, refresh. It might not have taken the first time, so let's see.
We'll see if it does. If
Yes,
not,
you don't. Yeah, you are correct, Phil. You don't really have to fight Blue. That's the thing. Okay, so yes. And it's still okay.
Still having that issue deleting that container.
Said, this is we are running low on time. I think we've proven our point. I can't actually show it working, but it mostly is.
We tried.
We
got to the
we
point of
tried.
actually doing it. And I will say that Learn is going to have information about deploying to various cloud providers instead with the Boba Tea Shop app. So it's coming.
We are, and also if you tune in next week, we will be going through, and by we, I mostly mean me, until I have a problem and I tap in Laura again, who was like planning to do something completely different this afternoon. So I was like, hey, come jump on the stream with me. But in that one, we're going to talk a little bit about different stacks, how the outputs go from each other, and how secrets transfer again. But let's go ahead and do a Pulumi destroy and just get, T is not a real thing. And Pulumi is in timeout hell. So yeah, the thing is, you sometimes do have to kill, but then that's where you're going to have to do a little bit of an import and export and do a refresh and see the state that you're in. Just sort of the question, by the way, was just saying sometimes I get a Pulumi up and it gets stuck. So if you do, because I think if you do Control C to interrupt it, now your state is in a weird, no pun intended, weird state. And so that's where your Pulumi refresh, or even you could do a Pulumi import into a file, or sorry, Pulumi export into a file and then bring that in. But refresh is where you want to get started. And then let me just do a Pulumi stack rm dev and just clean up after myself. And it's that simple. So
yeah, there's that weird cut screen one.
Yeah, I don't like that one. There it is.
I will say, so other than refresh, the other thing to know is that you can get that universal resource number or unique resource number, the URN, which you can find in your CLI, or if you actually go onto the console, you'll be able to find it there. That URN is what you can use to like specifically remove a resource from your state and then reinsert it later. So if you like kind of just take it out, then do a Pulumi refresh, it'll pull the resource back in whatever state it's currently in. So that's another way you can do it. It's not recommended, but I found that actually works.
It'll get you where you got to go.
Pulumi refresh doesn't do what you need it to do. So,
well, everybody, thank you for joining us in our second instance of whatever the heck we're calling this. We're still sourcing some ideas for our weekly live stream show, but go ahead and mash that subscribe button either in YouTube or in Twitch, wherever you are watching us. And we'll be back next week to do a little bit more with Learn Pulumi. So, and we will also think of a good way to end the show and a good tagline. But right now, I don't think we have one. So see you on the internets.